Pushkin.
So how's it feeling being back in the promo world?
Oh, it's cool. I am excited.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a weird job, and it's not the kind of job that you expect to get to do for too long.
Totally.
You hope, but it doesn't usually work out this way. So I think it's pretty cool. I mean, it's been 32 years since my first promos, really, and I'm still here.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool. I've been a rock star for a long time, and I really dig it. So every time we go back to do this stuff,
Yeah.
I get a little thrill.
Oh, that's nice.
I don't know. It's like I'm still making records, and people still want to talk to us about it.
Yeah.
We could have self-sabotaged ourselves into the grave by now. We haven't. And everyone could just be so bored that they don't want to talk to us. And that hasn't happened either. So
Yeah.
it's good stuff.
Yeah, I was talking to Billy Corrigan recently, and he was saying that most bands or most artists who get signed, it's expected that they have 4 years.
Oh, really?
And that's
Who
sort
did the
of
math
like-
on that?
Yeah. It's already extremely difficult to get signed at all, but to have a career that spans 3 decades is pretty phenomenal.
I think he overestimated that at 4 years. Maybe you'll spend 4 years on the label, but
Oh.
I mean, I would think the greatest graveyard for bands is signed bands. Like that you get in there and then they just shelve you, or they, nothing happens. I don't know. It seems like, anyways, it's great to not have that happen to you.
Totally.
Although, isn't it cool if he is related to Bill Burr?
I didn't ask him about that because it feels like such a touchy subject, but they do look a lot alike.
Well, I think it's a touchy subject because he sprung it on them, like without telling them.
On Bill Burr.
On Bill Burr, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is weird. It's a weird thing to do.
It's very like Jerry Springer.
Yeah. And I can understand why Bill Burr would have been a little annoyed about that. But
yes.
Fucking Bill Burr. I'd like to be related to Bill Burr. We could talk about all kinds of shit. I think that would be great.
Yeah, I know. That's the craziest thing. It's so funny.
Yeah.
I love that. I love your connection to comedy too. I watched your first. Have you only been on Rogan once?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I watched that episode and I just thought it was cool how just the connection you have. It sounds like you're friends with a lot of comedians, with Jeff Ross and some other guys.
Yeah, Jeff. I know Jeff. Well, I was friends with Bob Saget forever. And Bob introduced me to Jeff, and we became very close friends. We went and did a USO tour together. But also for me, comedians that is the highest form of live performance to me. Like they are the tightrope walkers. Like I love live performance. I love going to the theater. I love bands. I admire anyone that can go up there and really do it in front of people for real. And nobody does it like comedians because they're more dependent on an audience than any of us. I don't care what happens in the audience, but I mean, I just think comedians are incredible. I've been obsessed with it my whole life. Growing up in San Francisco, it was a big comedy town, and I went to see comedy all the time as a kid, and a young adult, and I've just always been obsessed with it. And getting to know so many of these guys, I'm a huge fan of like Alex Edelman and Mike Birbiglia, guys who write these long form pieces that I think are so. I've been obsessed with Mike Birbiglia forever.
Yeah. You said that you don't care about the audience's reaction. You're sort of just, I imagine you're just doing your own thing for you, but correct me if I'm wrong about that. But does it seem like in your conversations, they care about the audience, or are they also sort of just in their own experience?
Well, it's much more symbiotic, like when you're a comedian. I shouldn't say I really don't care. It's not that, but I could play with a dead silent audience. When the audience is really responsive, it's the greatest thing in the world. Yeah. But if they're not, we could still play just as good a show. And in fact, you can't be too affected by it because the truth is all you can really see is the first few rows. So everything after that, let's say the first 3 rows are sleeping, but there's 10,000 people behind them. So you can't like decide to suck that night because, as a musician, you got to be able to just play no matter what the audience is doing. It doesn't matter. But for a
Yeah.
comedian, you need the response because the laughs are the arc that
Yes.
it's part of the arc of the performance. And we're not dependent on that. So they have to ride that in a way that is, I think, terrifying,
Yeah.
I've done some like with Jeff and Bob, they both used to have me come play piano and we would banter,
Yes.
and it's incredibly satisfying to get the laughs,
Yeah.
but terrifying because may not, and having done a comedy tour with Jeff, like where we were going to USO bases where it's like, and we were going to Landstuhl and like the hospitals really
Wow.
where the first places people were transported, and these particular hospitals dealt with a lot of PTSD and a lot of like really traumatic shit, and it was a lot of the doctors and the patients who were dealing with severe trauma,
Wow.
and it would be like Colin Kane would do a set as a comedian. Sarah Tiana would do a set as a comedian. The whole thing's hosted by Stewie Stone. And then I come on. And then Jeff and Robert Klein. And so it's like funny, death march. Because I'm not a very good piano player. The only things I could play were like the most maudlin, saddest Counting Crow song.
Oh.
But it was, I had to kind of like be funny too. I don't know. It was really challenging and cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been such an incredible experience and a
Yeah,
humbling
it was wild.
experience. Yeah. I've heard you say that the place that you're most comfortable is on stage in front of an audience or playing with a band. When did you first realize that, and what was that realization like for you?
It was more about being uncomfortable in the rest of my life,
Yeah.
generally, and then finding that there's this thing I could do that made a place for me in the world. That like I had real concerns when I was younger with how I was going to take care of myself. I knew that I was dealing with some pretty severe mental illness, even if I didn't know what it was then. And I didn't know how I was going to make that transition to being an adult. It's one thing when you got to go to class every day, however difficult it is. But when you have to just make a life for yourself and you have all this handicap going on, all this difficulty, I didn't know how that was going to work. And then I found this thing I do that makes it all possible. I think it was that writing songs gave me a way to process life.
Mm-hmm.
And it also was a way that other people were drawn to. I don't think I was comfortable on stage right away or anything like that. In fact, I know I was very uncomfortable on stage right away at the beginning. It took a long time, but I think it's that comment really came out of someone asking me if I ever had stage fright, and I said, no, man, I have rest of the day fright. Like the stage is fine. I don't think I actually said like I'm more comfortable on stage, but it came from somebody asking me, do you ever get stage fright? And I was like, oh, no, stage is fine. Stage is great. It's like, it's the rest of life that I have always struggled with.
Yeah.
The stage is like, I know what I'm supposed to do up there. I'm going to improvise and, but I know there's like a map. I even have a set list that tells me what's coming next, and I'm free to explore and expand on everything in that list of things. Not that it's easy or anything, but it's comfortable. I know what to do there. It's not like walking into a party full of people and I have no idea what to say to people, but I do know what to do when I walk on stage, and I'm not that I'm never nervous or anything, but it's I'm so much more comfortable there than I am in the rest of life that there's like no comparison. So stage fright is not much of a problem anymore. I definitely had it at times at first,
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why. Seems terrifying.
My first
to me.
few gigs, I lost the first 3 gigs I played in my first real band as an adult. I completely lost my voice that day of the show. I woke up with no voice, no idea why it happened. I had to bring ginger root on stage, cut it up and chew it and swallow it during the show because it was the only thing that got my voice back. And it just happened for like 3 gigs right at the beginning of my career.
That's a
And
lot,
then it stopped.
by the way, at the time. Like 3 gigs is a lot. That's like
It was, and out of
everything.
nowhere, and especially when they're your first gigs.
Yes.
I'd played gigs as a kid in a band, like when I was 13, but now I'm like in my mid 20s and I've got a band and we're playing my songs and I go to sing and no, forget go to sing. I wake up that day with no voice and I go through the whole day. I can't talk. I can't make, it's the weirdest thing. It happened for 3 gigs and then it stopped, So I didn't feel like I was afraid, but that's some kind of weird psychosomatic reaction,
Totally.
Yeah.
Was that something you talked to your parents about when you were growing up, about feeling uncomfortable in any of like the mental illness you were experiencing? Were you open with your parents about that?
Not early on. I just don't think I recognized it. I just thought that's what life was like.
Yeah.
That it was weird and I was awkward and we moved around a lot
Yeah.
early on. So I didn't know it wasn't like everybody else in my class who knew everybody. They'd known each other since kindergarten. I had usually just gotten there. That was true in 1st grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade were all new cities, and then 7th grade was a new school. So, it was a lot of experiences where I'd only known anybody for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
So I just chalked it up to being shy. It wasn't until I started having some more sort of hallucinatory experiences in the latter parts of high school that I realized this isn't supposed to happen. This is not that. This is weird and scary and kind of psychedelic and not cool. And then I went to some doctors and talked to my parents but I was probably a junior in high school when that happened.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was started then with really, the more disturbing parts of it. Now I can look back on it and see, okay, that was happening to me in 1st grade.
Wow.
I can see what it was, the weirdness and the difficulty and the being inside my own head. All the things that make up a dissociative disorder, I could see them now.
Yeah.
Right back in 1st grade, but I didn't know that then. You're not really thinking about that stuff. You just think you're not popular,
Yeah. Are there any ways in which you apply the, like you were talking about being on stage, you have a set list. So you have sort of a map of what you're going to do. Have you applied that to other parts of your life outside of performing? Like as a way to live, as a way to sort of like write yourself?
I make a lot of lists for things, but it's not, but everybody makes grocery lists. I don't know.
Like, are you someone who benefits from having like a schedule? Like, is that feel?
No, I don't like that. I prefer to have open space and then make things in the schedule. But you know what I do? Like, I've always cooked since I was a kid. And like during the pandemic, I really started cooking again a lot because we were here. And one of the things I do is I do a lot of research. When I want to find something I want to cook, I'll read a lot about it first. And then I'll make the recipe from several other recipes often. And I'll read it over a lot, before I make it too.
Yeah.
And the same way when we were doing the podcast, I would spend like a lot of research time researching all the stuff I wanted to talk about when we had the Underwater Sunshine podcast, talking about the music. Because if we're going to do like a 4-part, like a 4-hour, 5-hour series on punk music, then I really need to have my notes and have it together, which is how I started cooking again, because when we couldn't do the podcast over the pandemic, I needed something to do with all that time. So I started cooking. So I do things like that. Like I'm not as comfortable just winging it.
Totally.
I mean, I will wing it still, but I put a lot of preparation into the winging it. I'll make my own recipe, but I'll put a lot of preparation into that recipe before I do it.
Does that have any sort of overlap with the way that you write songs?
No, not really at all. That is wing. I mean, I do that a lot off the top of my head, and it's very inspiration based. I mean, there's a lot of craft that goes into it too, but you really get in a groove with feeling stuff and then finding ways to express in words and music those things you're feeling.
Does it build over time with experience, or is it more, does the craft get to where it's at from studying?
Well, you push yourself into the writing. You push yourself to find the ways to say things that aren't the obvious ways, the ways that are you. So you look for the details in the feeling you want to express. Like saying I really like her, or I love her, or I love you isn't particularly meaningful. I mean, a lot of people have said it. What does I love her tell you about me? Not much, and not much about the situation and not much about the relationship or anything. But if you say, and all at once I look across a crowded room to see the way that light attaches to a girl. Well, now you've got this picture of someone in a room looking at someone, and all those details, that communicates a lot of feeling.
Yeah.
And also paints a picture that's very vivid of light hitting someone across a hospital room, but you don't necessarily, that line doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. You have to think about, you want to express this thing. So you think about the room you're in or the room you were in, and you think about the details and how can I conjure this feeling, which is I liked her.
Yeah.
But in a way that's not just I liked her, because that doesn't really give anybody anything, and then the craft is like disciplining yourself to do that.
Yeah.
I read a book by Stephen Sondheim once, and he mentioned that he always keeps a rhyming dictionary with him. And I was like, why would you do that? That's so hack, And I consider him as good a songwriter that has ever lived, And he said, well, it's just a tool. Why wouldn't you have a tool that gave you a bunch of ideas? Because it just gives you a bunch of words that you might want to use. And one of those words, even the one that you don't use, might cause an image to pop up in your head that you do want to use later on, And so I just thought, oh, it's weird. I'll get a rhyming dictionary. And I keep them around now, and they're really useful. And sometimes I'll just make lists of words that rhyme, and then it'll inspire something else later in the song or right there, that there are a whole lot of different ways to apply craft.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can feel like it should just be this feeling you get. And that inspiration and that emotion, that is really important. You want the writing to be like infused with feeling and inspiration.
Yeah.
But, you can't always expect it to just happen off the top of your head. I've written whole songs off the top of my head, just jamming with the band, and I'm singing into a mic, and what's going on 4-track. Round Here was written almost entirely off the top of my head. I just got the tape later and looked at it, and it was all there. But you also, sometimes you sit down and you work on it. This record, I wrote the first half of the record on my friend's farm, and I went back there a year later and wrote the rest of it. And on the way home, I stopped in London because my friends in the band Gang of Youths were making a record, and I had already sung on it once, but they had scrapped the record and they were re-recording it, and I needed to go sing on it again. So I stopped there and sang on a bunch of stuff. And then when I got home, a little while after I got home, David Leo Pepe, the singer, sent me the record finished. And it was so good. And in listening to it, I thought, I didn't hit this bar on the stuff I just wrote. Those songs aren't good enough. And this has never happened to me before in my entire career. I've never second guessed a song like this. When I'm done, they're done.
Yeah.
If they're not good enough, I usually throw them out, It was clear to me that I had kind of misjudged. I thought that Virginia Through the Rain was perfect, but
It's such a good song. It's a
I love
beautiful
that
song.
But the rest of them, like Spaceman in Tulsa, it had too many sections. It went through too many permutations. I went back to the drawing board and I really took that song and tuned it up and tightened it up. The song that became Under the Aurora, it wasn't a very good chorus. I kept all the verses in a slightly different order, but I wrote an entire new chorus for it, which is now the song is called Under the Aurora. The other chorus wasn't good enough. Boxcars, it was too hard for me to play and I hadn't finished it. I had all the ideas in my head, but not the song. So I went back and reworked all that stuff and then sat on it because I think the act of realizing they weren't good enough really shook my confidence in them. And so they sat there for 2 years. It's why there was such a chunk of time between Sweet One and the Sweet Tooth, because I don't think I even sent them to the band. I didn't feel good about them. Even after I'd reworked them and I thought they were great, I had a lot of doubts and I was a little embarrassed. And finally, I wrote With Love from A to Z, which was the one song I wrote here at home. And I loved that. And I looked at the other songs and I was like, I got to figure this out. And I called up Millard and Jim, our bass player and drummer, and Immer, our guitar player, and I said, I need everybody to come to my house like for a week. Just come in the next few weeks. We need to set some time. I got to demo these songs. I got to play them with you guys because I can't tell. I felt like I'd written a bunch of stuff that was a stretch for me to write
Yeah.
and also past my ability to play.
Hmm.
I'm not a good enough player to play these songs well enough to judge them. And I needed the band here to play them, especially
Yeah.
Boxcars, which was so much a guitar song in my head the whole time. And I really couldn't even finish it until I had the guys here. And as soon as we started playing, we were like, oh, I love this song. Okay, yeah, Spaceman is great. A to Z is great. Boxcars, okay, now it sounds great. That riff is great. You know, and Aurora, okay, it's not just long. It's going to be great. You know, these are really cool. We got so excited. We wanted to go in the studio right away. We went in like 3 weeks later, and in like 11 days, we recorded the whole thing.
Wow.
And it went really quickly from that point on. But
So
it got delayed by 2 years.
Yeah. Is that a feeling for you if you're going through like a crisis of confidence before that, when everything works out and you're with the band and you crack the code, you make everything work? Is that just like, oh my God, thank God it's not gone. I haven't lost it. Were you
It
that
had never
scared?
happened to me before.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I lost it, but I had certainly lost confidence. For most of my career, when I'm writing, I know it's good. And that's why, otherwise I don't even finish it. You know, I know when a song is right, and I write most things in one sitting. You know, I don't really rework over months and months. This happened a little bit with the songs on Some Wonder Wonderland because they were so different from anything I'd written before. But this was different. This was like, I had to rework the songs. They needed work.
Yeah.
And then they got great, but I didn't know it. And then when we started playing them, I was like, oh, yeah, this is great. Okay, thank God. Yeah, this is fucking, we were all so excited that we did it all in about 4 or 5 days. And then we were in the studio 2 or 3 weeks later, like recording it.
So cool.
Yeah, it went really fast. I mean, they you know, part of them was that they're like Boxcars, it had its genesis in a way during the pandemic because all of a sudden there were these 2 years where I couldn't play.
Yeah.
And at one point, this riff kind of got in my head that went, coronavirus, 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 no. It was like this metal riff that I was like, that earworm that got in my head, and I was running around the house singing it for like months at a time and driving my girlfriend crazy.
Oh my God.
And then when I never thought I'd make anything out of it because it was a joke. I thought the riff was awesome, but the song Coronavirus probably wasn't going to be, you know?
Yeah.
And then when I was writing what became Boxcars, you know, I had that chorus, that mom and dad and a couple of kids, you know, and I had the verse music in this chorus. And one day I was like, oh man, I wonder if that riff would work here. You know, and so that this riff that I never expected to see the light of day under any circumstances, because it was kind of a joke in my head, became like one of the best guitar riffs I've ever written, you know, like here leading off that song. It's blistering. I'm always tempted to sing Coronavirus over it, but
you should.
You know.
So you said maybe this is a metal riff. Have songs ever come to you that are in just a completely different genre? Like an EDM song, like a hip hop, like anything, like has something ever come to you and you're like, oh.
Well, kind of. I mean, in that like my abilities to play piano are pretty limited. And so often the idea I have in my head sounds nothing like what it sounds like when I play it. Like mostly I try and get off the piano as soon as possible. I want to teach it to the band and then get it away from what it started as. You know, like Boxcars is a perfect example. It didn't sound very good on piano, but it was never supposed to be on piano. Like I often hear guitar but play piano. So I'll hum it to the guys, or I'll there are songs that are meant to be piano songs the way I play them. And some of those songs I end up playing on the records, like A Long December or Goodnight LA, Colorblind I played, Mrs. Potter's Lullaby. Yeah. But often it's really not. Like what I've got going on is not where I want the song to go. You know, like Mr. Jones is a guitar song, but I wrote that on piano. But it was never supposed to be on piano. You know, like
when you wrote that, did it sound different? So if you're playing Mr. Jones, for example, on piano, how did that sound when you were singing it to the band? Is it the same melody?
I don't know. The melody was probably the same.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, the melodies are often the same. It's just the feel of the song. I'll often have to describe to them, like, Hanging Around was a piano song. It's always supposed to be done to a drum loop. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that drum loop was always going to be really important.
Have you always been a romantic person, like even when you were younger before you started writing music?
I don't know. What's like I mean,
You seem very romantic. I mean, just the line that you just said about seeing a woman across the room and the light hitting her, like that's very romantic.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that line is supposed to be. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the point of that line.
Do you feel like as a little kid, like you had feelings like that? Like were you,
Well, when you're dissociative, you spend a lot of time pretty far back in your own head, and that can
mm,
be pretty isolating. And I think connection is something that you really lack and that you really want, but it seems like
yeah,
such a long way from you to other people. And so I think that there's a yearning that goes with that for connection and closeness. That's a big part of my writing and a big part of me, probably. I don't know if I would describe that as romantic. I mean, although that, romance is certainly a part of, making connections. But it was, I think music has always been about reaching out from me to other
yeah.
stuff, and the connection been really important. And the music provided me with a way of connecting with people that I didn't necessarily have otherwise, you know.
Do you ever think about what your career would be like had the Counting Crows not blown up with the first two albums, especially the first album, like out the gate, like you guys were huge. If that would have happened on like in the middle of your career, do you ever think about how things might have been different?
Well, it seemed like that's what was happening. Like, I mean, we were out for a while we were like a college radio band for a while there. Even when we played on Saturday Night Live and Mr. Jones was kind of a radio hit already, the record wasn't even in the top 200. I mean, we weren't really blowing up at all. And that was kind of what we thought. I mean, nobody really thought we were like this instant hit band like Nirvana was right then, who were our label mates. That we had a 3-record deal. The talk was, you hoped you maybe sell 100,000 records on that first record. And you got a chance to build a career. The model was probably like REM, who spent 5 records on an indie label. That's kind of what we thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
Or not what we thought. That's kind of what we hoped was going to happen. But we played round here on Saturday Night Live and our career blew up. It was really that. I mean, the record jumped 40 spots a week for 5 weeks and landed us
Crazy.
at number 2 for the next couple years. But it hadn't been before that. It had been out for 3 or 4 months.
Hmm.
We were touring. Things were going pretty well. I mean, Mr. Jones was doing okay on the radio. MTV played it a little bit on 120 Minutes. It all seemed pretty good. And then it just went through the stratosphere,
Yeah.
But, I mean, it would have been cool in some ways because the backlash was pretty severe after the first album.
Yeah.
The Satellites at the time was pretty disregarded. I mean, I think people really love it now, and it's a really respected record. And December has become like a Christmas standard almost for people.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was so excited about that record. I thought it was like incredible. It was a real departure from August, and we were really growing as a band, But it was completely dismissed at the time. I mean, we got some good reviews, but there was also a lot of people who were just really, really sick of us,
Do you
So,
follow that same arc with other artists that come out and blow up? Like someone like Drake, like the backlash is inevitable if you get so big.
well, yeah, but it took a long time to happen with Drake. I mean, and
It
there were
really
people who
did.
didn't like Drake at the beginning too. It was very,
Yeah.
but it was more like what happened to, like Alanis, where it was just,
Yeah.
you get one album and you're done.
Yeah.
Like after that, nobody's interested because they're so tired of you. I think that happens a lot to bands that are too big on their first album. I
Yep.
really tried to shut down that record. After Round Here, I told them I would no longer make any videos. We were done. No more singles, no more videos. And then the rest of the songs went up and down the charts anyways, without
Yeah.
us doing that. What happened was DGC, I had refused to do any more singles and any more videos. And then I forgot that I had given DGC this demo track for their Rarities record. Like a year and a half before that, I had given them Einstein on the Beach. And because we never planned on recording Einstein for August and everything after. I thought it was a clever song, but not a great song.
Yeah.
I had no interest in putting it on our record. And I completely forgot about it. DGC had asked me early on, do you have anything we can put on this Rarities record? And I was like, yeah, take this thing. We're not using it. And then when I told them no singles, because the next single would have been Rain King, which is what we always thought was the big single off the record. Mr. Jones was like a humble introductory track that was catchy.
Yeah.
And Round Here was a real statement of purpose that was going to define the band. And then we thought Rain King will be the hit, which, because you used to do that back in, you put out introductory tracks, you know, and I refused to put out Rain King. After Round Here was so big and the record was so big, I was like, no more. We need to put this down so we can have a career. And then,
Smart.
And then they released the Rarities album and put Einstein on the Beach to radio. So I was worried that Rain King was too pop. And what ended up coming out was way more pop than Rain King. It was this demo, Einstein on the Beach, and that went straight to number one.
Wow.
And then after that, every song on the record went up the radio charts on their own for a while, one at a time. It seemed like almost every song on the record was getting played on the radio over the next 2 or 3 years. So there was no controlling it after that. It just was, I might as well have just put out Rain King, because it would have been probably better for us. And that, but after a while, you can't blame people. Radio stations will play it to death because they get their advertising dollars from playing popular things.
Yep.
So if you're too popular, it's not a surprise that people are sick of you at a certain point, because it's like they have no choice. When it was radio and not Spotify, you had no choice what you heard.
Yeah.
So
did you have a mentor at that point, someone in the music industry who you could talk strategy with, or you could just sort of try and figure out the best way to approach all of this?
No, we had really good managers. It's hard to find anyone who doesn't want to chase success, though. It's hard to tell someone, no, we're not putting out any more singles because our album's doing too well, and have anyone think you're anything but out of your fucking mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they want to hit while the iron's hot. They want to make the money right now, and they are not as concerned. Our managers were, but your record company is not concerned with your career. They're concerned with selling records.
Yeah.
And, so it was really hard to tell people, no, I don't want to do anymore. I didn't get a lot of positive responses from that.
Right.
But I was sure it was the right thing to do, and I was right, because we got backlash. But, it happens. It's hard to complain too much about having success.
Right.
It's hard enough to have that, I was very, very happy with our career anyways. And I just was so excited about the next record and making Satellites. And it was kind of a rude awakening to have it come out and get such a, the backlash that hit it. We hadn't had much, we'd barely had any bad reviews before that.
Does it make you salty when people change their mind about albums collectively? Like when something first comes out, people are kind of like, these guys are overexposed. But then 10 or 15 years later, it's like, oh, I love this album. Does that piss you off? How do you, does that piss you off?
I'm glad at all the sort of re-examination of, Recovering Satellites, because I always thought it was a great record. It is annoying that it wasn't just Satellites. People were so sick of us that for 10 years at that point, people were more reviewing who I dated or who they thought I dated than they were reviewing our concerts.
Yeah.
That lasted from 96 when we released Satellites, all the way up through the first really good reviews we ever got again were 10 years later when we released Saturday Nights and Sunday Mornings. It was all through Satellites, This Desert Life, and Hard Candy, was hard to buy a good review. And it was hard to buy a good concert review even. There was just a lot of smack talk, a lot of really disses in Random Notes, in jokes about us in Rolling Stone and Random Notes, and concert reviews about girls they thought I dated, some of whom I've never met in my life, And there was a lot of that for 10 years. It was a bummer. Because I thought we did great work. I think that Recovering the Satellites and This Desert Life and Hard Candy are great records. And now people go back to them and talk about all these songs they love. But
Yeah.
in that 10-year period from like 96 to 2007, there were like no good reviews, or
How did
very
things
few.
ultimately turn around?
I don't know. But it turned around during Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. It turned around. Like,
Yeah.
I remember, one thing I remember is that Rolling Stone came. It reminded me because Brian Hyatt's going to actually interview me for this record for Rolling Stone. And he wrote a piece about us, I think, during Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. And it was the first piece anyone had written on us in Rolling Stone since August and Everything After. There had
Wow.
been like a few live reviews and we had gotten mentioned in random notes, but there had never been an article in 10 years, I don't think. And so I remember, I just remember that it happened at that point. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I
The
think the
tide is
internet
turning.
had changed a lot, and there was a lot of bands had come up that were hugely influenced by us and talked about it quite vocally. A lot of punk bands and a lot of emo bands were really influenced by Counting Crows, like Dashboard Confessional. Chris
Yeah.
Carrabba was very vocal in talking about how much he loved our band and how influenced he was. He covered Angels of the Silences. The guys in Panic at the Disco would cover Around Here, and they talked about it. There was a lot of indie bands who came up talking about Counting Crows. There was a tribute album made that was all punk bands.
Wow.
Bands like Between the Buried and Me, so like, and by the internet, it had really expanded by that time. So there was also a lot of publications on the internet like Absolute Punk. And I just remember reading a lot about us in those magazines as the bands, a whole generation of bands came up that loved our band
Yeah.
and were very vocal talking about it. And it kind of came from the bottom up. It wasn't like Entertainment Weekly or Rolling Stone. It was
Right.
absolutepunk.net.
It's from musicians.
Yeah, but also a lot of internet indie rock. There were zines that were online
Got it.
that
Yeah.
came up, and they talked about us a lot. The first really good reviews I started reading again happened online and in indie magazines.
Sounds like it was just sort of like a changing of the guard, like a new generation of people coming in,
Yeah,
discovering
somewhat.
music.
But also I think it was that there had been that the music media industry, the media for music industry was very gatekept in the years
Yeah.
before that. You had radio, and you had Spin, Rolling Stone, whatever, a few magazines, and Entertainment Weekly, and people that wrote about music. But then all of a sudden you had thousands of
Yeah.
and like now you have podcasts. Before suddenly there was all these people that weren't like they didn't come up with that attitude. They were just music fans who started their own magazines or their own podcasts or their own, fanzines online. And suddenly they thought about things very differently. I just think there had been a real old guard kind of media industry that was suddenly expanded into,
Yeah.
like you guys, like podcasts didn't exist back then. So you have all these people who have their opinions. They don't come from,
Like 5 people.
they didn't come right from, a journalist who worked at one of 4 magazines who wrote music
Exactly.
reviews. There used to be, Time, Newsweek, Rolling Stone, Spin, Entertainment Weekly, People, and a couple other. You know what I mean? That was it.
Yeah.
And now there is a whole mega media industry that comes from everywhere else. It's everybody, every man and every woman has their own soapbox
Outlet.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their own outlet. So that gatekeeper is not there anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. I thought it was really awesome. I heard, I don't know where it was, but I heard that you were a women's study major in college.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
How
For
did
the
that
first
come
few
to be?
years. I was an accident. I
Was that like
had,
the easy major to get into?
no, it was really hard. It was the opposite. It was by far the hardest series of courses I've ever taken in my life.
Where'd you go to college?
The first couple years at Davis and then at Berkeley.
Oh, sweet. I went to Berkeley too.
So it was. I was brought up in very much like a women's lib household. My mother was an early member of NOW in the early 70s. Like we went to NOW meetings, and NOW celebrations in Houston when we lived in Houston during that week when Billie Jean King was playing Bobby Riggs. And
Wow.
we had that first issue of Ms. Magazine that came out of, was it in Life magazine? The pullout with Gloria Steinem. I was
Wow.
brought up in that very much. And but I had a lot of butting heads with my mom as a kid. And she had left to go to medical school when I was like 15.
Oh,
So she was away a lot of that time. And when I was applying to college, or I just got into college, I remember having a big argument with her one day about something, and she called me a chauvinist about it. And I was like, fuck you, I'm not a chauvinist. And I went upstairs and I was filling out my course things, and I think I picked as my sixth choice Social History of American Women in the Family. I wasn't going to get it. And I was like, see, I'm not a chauvinist. I'm taking women's studies courses. So fuck you, you know? And
yeah.
then I went up for orientation week, and I spent the entire time getting stoned and drunk, and didn't get into some of my other classes, and never bothered to try and switch the courses. So I ended up in Social History of American Women in the Family,
Oh,
which I had never intended to take. I will say this on my part. I don't think I was ever a chauvinist, but I was totally full of shit proving it to my mom by that course. But I ended up in the course, and it was incredible. It was like 200 women and 4 guys in the class, you
yeah.
know, and I had probably more of a background in that stuff than any of the other guys, because I literally had grown up in the movement.
Yeah.
But I didn't know all the stuff. I hadn't read the literature. You know, you
Yeah.
read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, and
Yep.
The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And, you know, it's a whole half of our society that is, you know, fucked. Especially, it was different, somewhat better then, but, you know, it's still Reagan time. So the
Yeah.
promise of the ERA in the early 70s hadn't really come about in the early 80s when I was in college. It was just so good. It was really hard. We had to read an enormous amount. We had to
Yeah.
write an enormous amount. And I basically, it was bullshit me taking it in the first place, but
Mm-hmm.
I took every single course offered. I only stopped being a women's studies major because I realized I was writing songs, and I became an English major. I was getting straight A's in my English classes, and I realized it was just too easy. I took that my freshman year fall term, I took a women's studies class. I took a women in poetry class. I read Carolyn Forche's poetry, which was hugely, and I got the first REM record,
Oh,
and those things, and I wrote my first song. I lump
wow.
all those things together because they very much informed. My sister was 16 and at home. My mom was off at medical school. 16's a hard time to be a girl, and
Yeah.
she was struggling with it, especially with your mother out of town. And my first song was written about, like, you know, the difficulty she was having. It
Oh, it
was
was about your
very
sister.
informed. It was very informed by, like, everything I was reading and thinking about, and you know, I was just. But once I started writing songs, I started writing every day. It's all I did was write songs, and I realized that I couldn't do that really at Davis. I could write, but I couldn't start a band. The bands there were all cover bands. They played at frat parties. It wasn't
Yeah.
anything I really wanted to do. I needed to go to Berkeley, and I also needed to go there for the English, to become an English major, to learn to really write, I thought. Um,
Did you
um,
graduate?
I did not turn in my thesis. I'm
Oh.
missing one paper.
Oh,
Um,
man. Come on.
I was writing my thesis on H.D. Hilda Doolittle, the poet who was expatriate living in London during the Blitz. She had the poem called "The Walls Do Not Fall," and it was an epic poem. I was writing my thesis on that, and it just wasn't very good at all. And I knew it wasn't very good. The more I wrote songs, the harder it was for me to write essays. It's a
Hmm.
very different style of writing. Like, one
Yeah.
comes from this wealth of feeling, and then you try and find ways to hone it down into a craft. And the other one comes from a bunch of thought processes and an idea, and then you support the arguments in an essay, and they're
Exactly.
kind of backwards versions of each other. And the more I became really, like, I spent all day writing songs for 2 or 3 years there, the harder it was to write essays. I just couldn't think that way very well anymore. And like, to this day, I don't write songs with ideas. Like, I don't have an idea for a song and then write it, really. Not like a theme. I might have a line.
Starts with
Um,
a line usually.
yeah, but I don't have, like, an idea. Like, whenever I try and do that, write thematically, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Ever since I started writing songs, I can't write that way. And I was really struggling with it at that point. I had was all done except for, as an English major at Berkeley, you needed to write a thesis, and
Mm-hmm.
it just wasn't very good. And so I went to my professor and I said, look, I need an extension on this. I'm gonna have to take an incomplete because I'm not gonna turn this in. It's not very good. It's probably I probably would have passed. I'm sure it was like
Yeah, that's
a
what I
C
was thinking.
paper,
It
but it
probably was
wasn't.
fine.
It was a weird way to sum up your college experience by getting a
Yes.
C, or something like that. And so she
Yeah.
said, look, just, you need to just try and do it right away, because people, if they get it done in the first semester after, they tend to get it done. If they don't, they tend to not get it done. So
Yeah.
I understand, just get it done. And I never did. So
Were your parents upset with you?
no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, not now. Look, I wanted to learn to be a writer, and I did. And
Yeah.
I owe it all to Berkeley and Davis, but they were great. They taught
Yeah.
me to be a writer, and I am, and many of my theses I've written since then have sold briskly.
Yes.
I feel like I got everything out of them in a really good way, and it's come up before about honorary degrees from them and stuff, and I
I
was
was
like,
going to
you know
say
what?
they owe you an honorary degree.
But I don't really want it. It came up and I sort of said no, because I feel like it's not respectful. I don't know. I really respect my time there,
Yeah.
but I didn't graduate. I didn't turn in my thesis. And so I don't really think I should get a degree.
I wonder if you can still turn it in.
I don't know, but I'm not going to. It worked. I respect college, and I got everything out of college. Like,
Same.
most English majors don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how
Oh,
it works
yeah.
out for them, but not like it worked out for me. Like, I have the utmost respect for everything I got out of Berkeley, and I have,
Me too. I love
but
it.
and I feel fine without the degree. It worked out great. Like, I'm the very rare English major who actually is a professional writer, and very successful.
Yeah.
It's been, I got it all from them, like,
Are you a short story reader?
not anymore, really. I used to a long time ago.
What do you read
Um,
now?
Oh, I read a lot of crap now. I used to read a lot of history and a lot of fiction, and I mostly just read sci-fi and stuff now, because I mostly use my reading on the treadmill.
Oh,
I
wow.
work out. I read on the treadmill and I work
You
out.
run, do you run or walk and read?
Both.
And read a book?
Yeah. Well,
That seems
I use my Kindle. I mostly just read sci-fi when I'm reading books now. I don't really. That was another problem I had. I started to have more problems in the latter part of my 40s. I had a lot of trouble reading. Some of the dissociative stuff fucked with my ability to focus that way. And so I didn't read anything at all for a number of years, really. And then I got back into it on the treadmill. And now I read a ton, none of which is,
Literature.
great literature, but
Yeah.
I read all the time now, constantly. And then I get on the treadmill and I come off again and read more, and get on the treadmill and read. And
Nice. Seems like it'd be hard to run and read, but
yeah, I think it is, but it works for me somehow. A
Yeah.
few years ago, when Saget died,
yeah.
my girlfriend came to me and said, "That was really scary. I wish you would be a little healthier. You're getting older, and I wish you would. I would just feel better."
Yeah.
And I was like, and after years of not taking that shit seriously, I started getting on the treadmill every day. And for like 3 or 4 years now, I've been every day and going to the gym. But the reading really helped it. Like, I found that it really worked for me. But I can't think too much about what I'm reading. I just want to plot,
Yeah. Well, whatever works. I mean, whatever gets you on the treadmill and keeps you on there is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read books about music sometimes. I read I read Joe Boyd's book, White Bicycles. I don't know if it's a fantastic book about.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
He was the producer who produced Fairport Convention and Nick Drake, a lot of different stuff. Richard and Linda Thompson, and
Oh,
a
cool.
lot of different. And he wrote this great book about life in the music, kind of in the English folk scene, even though he's
Oh,
American.
nice.
He's actually the sound guy. Did you see A Complete Unknown?
I did not.
Okay, well, he's the sound guy at Newport, who refuses
Okay.
to turn down.
Okay.
That was actually Joe Boyd. And they don't identify him in the film, but I know they do in the credits, and it's him.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I'm waiting for it to
yeah.
come on streaming, so I don't have to pay
It's
for it.
so
but
good.
Is
I
it?
hate, hate movies about music. They're always such bullshit. And they're always like, about, oh, he's this one, he's terrible with people, and let's show, it's so good. I
Really?
was prepared to hate it,
Yeah,
and
same.
it's just so fucking good.
Wow.
It is so great. I can't believe it is. I
Yeah.
still can't believe it's that good a movie, and it is. I've seen it twice now. Uh,
Wow.
Two movies I've seen recently that blew my mind were that and Becoming Led Zeppelin, the
Oh, I haven't seen
documentary.
that either. It's actually playing at
It's
a theater near me. I want to go see it in a
You
theater.
should go. It's so good. And they're both good for the same reason. They both play full songs.
Oh,
The
that's
movie does
nice.
too. The movie like actually plays songs, like real performances that are great.
But is it
And
Chalamet singing?
yeah, fucking bizarre that it's any good.
Yeah.
Him and a girl, Monica Barbera, who plays
Joan
Joan
Baez.
Baez,
Yeah.
they're both so good, and they're so good together. And Ed Norton
Wow.
as Pete Seeger you've never seen Ed Norton in a role like this, and he's fucking great. The guy that plays Woody Guthrie, Scoot McNairy, who does he's a mute at that point in his life for the most part because he's been so sick, and so it's mostly with his eyes.
Hmm.
It's just such a good movie. You got to see it. Those two movies for music fans are like, wow, like what a lush treat both those movies are. They give so much.
Wow.
They don't think of you as having no attention span,
Yeah.
which is I think a lot of movies about music think you have the attention span of a 4-year-old,
Yep.
and these ones do not treat you like that, and they're really good. And I
That's
tell
so
you,
good
I
to hear.
fucking hate movies about music.
Do you like
But
docs though? Music docs?
some, oh yeah, some docs more, but
Yeah.
very few. But so many docs are just like so. They're A lot of people who make documentaries, their benchmark for how to make a great documentary is behind the music,
Yeah. That's a
and
good
it
call.
should not be. That should
That's a good
not be.
call.
But this, like that Zeppelin movie, it's fucking great. Its benchmark is closer to Get Back
Get Back was
than
incredible.
yeah, and so is this. You're gonna blow your mind when you see it. Like there are at least 4, maybe 5 full song performances in that movie.
That's awesome.
Like full songs.
Aren't
Like
they incredible?
they're so good. Like
Did you come away with like any new takes on Zeppelin after seeing it?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot I did. I mean, I'm a fan, but I mean, I hadn't watched. The Song Remains the Same is not the greatest concert movie, and I had seen that and been like, but I have a lot of Zeppelin bootlegs, so I know how good they were. But I have
Yeah.
never seen this footage like this, where like, holy shit, the first song. My girlfriend's not a huge Zeppelin fan or anything, but she
Yeah.
went to the movie with us, and they got through playing the first song, which was I don't know if it was Heartbreaker or A Whole Lot of Love, whatever the first thing in the documentary is on some Dutch TV show or something. I don't know what it was, but it was over, and she turned to me and she's like, "Holy shit, they're great! What a fucking band!" And I was
Yeah.
like, "I know, unbelievable." One
Yeah.
of the songs is "Dazed and Confused," 10 minutes long. They play the whole fucking thing,
Wow.
and the footage they get all this great childhood footage. They got great they don't have footage with John Bonham, but they have a great interview with him. It's a really long interview, and they
Yeah.
play it throughout the movie over stuff. And there's scenes of the other guys in the band sitting, watching footage with the director while he
Oh,
plays the
that's nice.
Bonham interview, and they're really moved by seeing him.
Yeah.
And it's just fucking. It's only about the time from when they're kids leading up to the second record, but it is sublime for a music fan. It's like the real deal.
Yeah, I love that when you see a doc and it sort of gives you a whole new perspective on a band that's that legendary. That's why I love Get Back, because it was like I saw the Beatles in a whole different way. I understood them in a way that they're such an institution. It's hard to have new feelings or revelations about the Beatles.
You've heard every song so many times that you know every last inflection, and so it doesn't
Yeah.
give much to you, because listening to a Beatles song is often more like remembering than hearing.
Yes.
Because you already have a memory of every inflection in the song. So to see them
Yes.
sitting around in a room, to see how close they all are and how they fight, but how good friends they are, how loving Paul
And
and
how
John are with
silly.
each other. Yeah. But how loving
Yeah.
John is with Yoko and how loving Paul is with
Yeah.
Yoko. That like all
Yeah.
these legends of all the butting
Yes.
heads and everything, all the bitterness, you realize that some of that is just like a bad day,
Yeah.
you
And to
know?
see George's yearning, like, I want to contribute more than I'm allowed to. My voice isn't valued. Like, you see all of this, and Ringo just kind of like hanging back and
But how
coming in
good he
like,
is. How
yeah,
every time they start with a bizarre song idea, Ringo has the perfect fucking beat. He's just
yeah,
there. I don't know, if you're a
yeah,
musician or not, but like one of the hardest things about being in a band is if you have a drummer, it is so hard to work on new material if you don't have a drummer who is good at that particular skill of keeping the beat but not getting in the way as a
yeah.
drummer and therefore stalling new material because you don't know what to play yet and everything you're doing is fucking it up. Ringo is
Oh.
there every time with something original and cool and like they're writing and he's supporting and the songs take off because he's so good.
And he
It's
seems like
so
he's
easy to
not
write
really
him
paying
off.
attention.
I know, but when he comes in, it's like Get Back itself. Who would have think to go? You would think do get back, but he's like dum da dum da dum da dum da dum. Who thinks to do like a
Yeah,
fucking marching beat like that? But he does, and it's so good. It's the Zeppelin movies like that because you really get to see them play,
I
and
like
they're
that. Yeah.
really good. I
Yeah, they're
mean,
so good. Robert Plant is just like incredible. I mean, all
yeah,
of them are incredible.
it's blistering stuff. Like it's crazy good.
Oh, that's awesome. Are you, speaking of a fellow English major, are you a big Paul Simon fan?
Oh yeah, like I mean, to me,
What's your favorite album?
Hearts and Bones. It's to me, it's the one of the best written albums I've ever heard in my life. I mean, there's Graceland's great. All his albums are great.
Graceland's
But Hearts
incredible.
and Bones, I don't really love the first song. It's called Allergies, and it's Al Di Meola playing guitar in it. But everything after that is the best. The songwriting on that record is,
Yeah.
you should listen to it, man. Hearts and Bones is, and he's made a lot of great records and written a lot of great
Yes.
songs. I go back to that record all the time because the depth of the writing on it, it's just peerless to me.
Yeah.
I hear that documentary about him is so good. Everyone's told me that it's really, really good.
Oh, I
It just
haven't
came
heard
out like
about
a
that.
year ago or 2 years ago. I hear it's amazing. Why'd you ask?
Just because Paul Simon is I know maybe Simon and Garfunkel were both English majors. And also you
Oh, really?
mentioned Graceland. And I love Graceland. And I also feel like Graceland is very much like a Berkeley album. Like, I don't know, it has a Berkeley vibe to me.
I get that. I love that record. I think, but he's got so many. That first record, the Paul Simon record that has Mother and Child Reunion on it,
Oh,
that's an
that song is
incredible record.
incredible.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, he's yeah, so gifted.
he's a peerless songwriter to me, like as good as it comes.
Yeah.
But that record, Hearts and Bones, is very underappreciated to me. I think because the first song's not a great song, but
Yeah, could
everything
be.
else is. I mean, I studied that a lot. Like
Yeah.
that and Graceland, I really studied a lot. There was a great box set when they put Graceland out that had
Yep.
this like spiral binder in it that had a bunch of stuff about songwriting. He also talked about like rhyming and how he would work and he would make lists of words that rhyme to give him ideas for later in the song too. I remember really
Oh, that's
thinking
cool.
about that. As I read, I think that came out as well as the Sondheim book when I was working on the songs for Somewhere Under Wonderland. And I was trying to write in a whole new way for myself,
Yeah.
less just autobiographical plots, more about how I feel, but with other characters, as opposed to trying to make everything about my life.
Yes.
I realized I could write how I felt without making it a plot line from my life, and so I wrote songs like Palisades Park and I really studied that Graceland lyric book and all the stuff,
Yeah.
all the scribbling he does in the margins with all the different rhymes and really thinking about how to brainstorm ideas for writing. I don't know. That's a great record.
It's
I say
great.
Hearts and Bones because it's not as innovative as Graceland by
Yeah.
any stretch of the imagination, but the pure songwriting on it is just maybe the strongest group of songs anyone's. I just think it's
Wow.
incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Has it been satisfying seeing so many people connect with your music and hearing, over the past 3 decades, people come up to you and tell you how much they've connected to your songs and what they mean to them?
I think it's more me connecting with them for me. That does happen, what you're talking about. But I always feel really awkward.
Yeah.
I think it's more about like the feeling of me connecting with everybody. Like when I'm writing, when I'm on stage, me connecting with the band. Like it's more about me connecting with them than them connecting with me, for me. It works both ways though. You know, like the fact that I can talk about myself and that does connect me to other people is really cool. That it's something that is so personal to me can become personal to everybody.
Yeah.
But I'm still working from the it's personal to me perspective. Because inevitably other people's connections to me they're their connections. You know what I mean? They're in their heads and they're connecting with a picture of me, not actually with me. But it allows me to actually connect with people in a way that feels important. But the wall of connection coming back is often more disturbing than anything else, kind of.
Yeah.
You know,
because
it's
it's overwhelming.
And it's also, it's a lot of it takes place with a character inside their heads. That's a version of me that isn't actually me. They have deep connections to a version of me, but it's not actually me. And I don't know them at all. So I don't have any connection to them. You know what I mean? Like I have not thought of, I don't know them at all. So like, but they have this very real, deep connection to me that means the world to them.
Yeah.
And it has provided solace and joy and a million other feelings throughout their life. I've been present for all these parts of their life for them, but I wasn't actually there at all. So for me, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Such a
like,
trip.
I wasn't there for that. I was over here.
Have you had that experience with anyone who you really admire, any musicians who you feel extremely close to, and then you've met them and it's just sort of strange?
I have a lot of trouble talking to my idols. I have trouble forming sentences with certain of my idols who are the nicest people in the world, but I can't always think of anything to say.
Yeah.
There are people who have been great to me my entire career who I've known for decades, and they have been nothing but nice to me, and I cannot form sentences around them. And we're not friends because of that. You know, like it's a weird thing. Yeah, I mean, because I'm probably a lot more hesitant and careful about that. I don't come up with the expectation of knowing them because I don't. Yeah. And I'm ultra hyper aware of that because I've been on both sides of it. So like I don't show up to Bruce Springsteen's house expecting to be Bruce's best friend, even though Bruce is the nicest guy on earth. You know, he's the nicest, kindest guy, one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And I have a deep connection to that stuff, but it's not real. You know what I mean? I can't show up to his house.
Yeah.
Damn shame.
You probably could, but you won't.
We'll try. I'll try at some point.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam, so much. And
thank you.
And have fun on tour.
Oh, we will. Thanks so much.
Thanks for checking out Broken Record on YouTube. If you want to listen to us on the go, be sure to subscribe to Broken Record wherever you listen to podcasts.